Hello and welcome to Studio 8601. We are filming at Prince William Library's Makerspace, which is located in Central Library. My name is Melanie and I'm the branch manager at Independent Hill Library. This class is called Quilting 101, and I hope to teach you the basics of how to make a table runner, a trivet, and a small bag. Hopefully, I will give you the basic foundations to which then you can take to make any quilting project of you desire. Free kits are available with pre-cut fabric for you to use along with these classes. Right now, they're available to pick up at Chin Park, although we could easily have them shipped to the library of your choice. If you, however, prefer to use your own fabric, the directions that you will see will give you all the fabric requirements to make and cut your own. This is your table runner. The design that I show you is just a suggestion. You can take bits and pieces, but really it should be your design, and so do not feel it necessary to use the design I'm using today. Okay, so there were some tools that you will need to complete this project. One is a working sewing machine. Now, if you don't happen to have one, luckily in the Makerspace we have several that you can reserve time and come and do your sewing here. You'll also need thread, pins, needles, a pair of scissors, a seam ripper if you're like me and make plenty of mistakes that you might want to even have two when you misplace the first, a pencil or a chalk marker that I'll show you how to use later, an iron and an ironing board, which is also available here at the Makerspace, a rotary cutter, a rotary cutting mat, and a ruler. Again, all are available for you to use so that if you'd like, you could make this table runner using one of our kits, and it would cost you nothing more than coming here and spending some time using the Makerspace's equipment. I think it's helpful that I give you a background for some quilting basics that will help you in your journey to quilting. You'll hear a reference to quilting police, and quilting police are those individuals who like to do things a set way. I am not a member of the police force, and so I'm going to give you your choices. The first is whether or not to wash fabric. Washing fabric is not something I personally do. I'm not a proponent of it because I actually like the sizing and the, quote, chemicals that are in it. It helps the fabric to stay stiffer, and it also is quite a time saver. If you have to wash several yards of fabric and then you have to iron it, and it's just much easier to take it from where you bought it and start cutting. Proponents of washing say that it will allow any shrinkage to occur, and also if there's any color that would bleed from the fabric. We've come a long way, or the fabric industry has come a long way, and I personally have made over 100 quilts and have only had one quilt, then when it was washed, did have some kind of bleeding. And to counteract that, all you do is when you wash your quilt, you throw a couple color catchers into the washing machine and everything's fine. However, if you are a person that said chemicals, or you would just feel a higher comfort level washing your fabric first, have at it. I think I fall more on the lazy side of things, so that's why I don't. Which leads me to the whole aspect of whether or not to use starch. Again, If you receive one of our kits, the fabric has not been washed and it has been starched. If you were to wash your fabric, I feel that you would have to add starch to it, especially when you're a new quilter, as that it will not, this by no means is stiff, but it will lend some body to the fabric that will make it easier for you to manipulate and use it. There are some people who are anti-starch, as because due to where you live or possibly how you store your fabric, there have been stories I've read online where people find a little silverfish in their fabric. I have left the last 35 years in Prince William County. I tend to store my fabric in plastic bins. I have never had silverfish, even with the ones that I do have. It's an option for you. So whether you wash or not, or whether you starch or not, I just want to let you know there are pros and cons. And if you ever take to the internet, you will find plenty of opinions either way. Now, the last thing I want to discuss before we get started is thread color. Before I started quilting, I used to make outfits for my children when they were little. And when you do garment sewing, it's very important that your thread match whatever fabric you're using. Not so in quilting. I soon learned when I started quilting about 16 years ago that most quilters use just maybe, well, actually some quilters I know just use two colors. They either use black or white. I tend to use pretty much these colors, a light gray, a darker gray, kind of an off-white, a white, and a brown. And sometimes I will use, say, a darker mid-toned brown. You will not see any of the thread until we do the quilting. So I would not spend a lot of money. And in any way, it would be very difficult to try to match what color would you use on this. In this case, I'm just using a very pale gray to piece this quilt. There are also many choices of thread. First of all, let me just disclaim that I am being paid by no one. I get nothing for any of my opinions, and my opinions are just mine. But the better the thread you buy, the better it will be for your machine, the less lint you will have accumulate in your machine, and in the end, your machine has a better chance of lasting longer. And I would say if you have your own machine, to frequently remove where the bobbin lives and give it a good clean, because lint buildup is something that is very real and can damage quite a few machines. The most important thing I want to teach you during this series is how important it is to sew an accurate 1/4 inch seam. I can't stress this enough. If you're even off a 1/16 of an inch and you repeat that seam after seam after seam, by the time you finish a row, you could be easily off a 1/2 inch to an inch. So there are some ways to make it easier to get an accurate 1/4 inch seam. Now, they do sell what are known as specialty feet, and you can buy them to fit any kind of machine. And what you can see is that right here, you will have this piece of metal. The fabric would go, and you would just make the edge go against this, I'll call it a flange. And that would allow you to accurately sew a 1/4 inch seam. Now, this will work when you're only sewing like this. It will not always work, because sometimes these flanges become an impediment to your accuracy. Everyone has a line on their sewing machine that is a 1/4 inch. In this case, it's this number 3. In my case, if I were to put the fabric right here, the outside of my foot is a 1/4 inch. Now, this isn't always true, so if your machine was not one, you could buy painter's tape. And painter's tape actually has a benefit that neither of these feet do. You would take it and you very carefully line it up on that line. This painter's tape allows you to position your fabric so that you know well ahead that you are going to be hitting it at the 1/4 inch mark. So what I would do is when you first start out, sew a seam and measure to make sure that you have an accurate 1/4 inch seam, because I can tell you from experience, when you're not sewing an accurate seam, it will throw everything off. So I will leave this tape here and we will use it today so that you can see when I sew how it is the easiest. Now, the other thing is, some people I've seen online where they take a couple of Post-it notes and put the sticky edge here. Painter's tape won't go anywhere, and it's amazing how long it'll last. And it's really quite an inexpensive way to do it. But there is nothing wrong when you first start out if you want to buy a foot. But if you don't own your own sewing machine and you're coming here to use one of the sewing machines we have here at Central's Makerspace, Studio 8601, if you bring your tape, they'll have no problems with that. Should you wish to use one of the kits we have made up, each kit will have, in this case, this brown print is what we're using as our focus fabric. And then you will have 4 different accent fabrics. In this case, I'm pairing up the aqua with the orange and the purple with the green. Sometimes I thought it looked pleasing. Any of the combinations would go, but when in doubt, I've begun 16 years into this journey to actually use the color wheel, which has quite a bit of information on it. So your fabric will differ, and there are, I think there are 15 different fabric choices. And should you have any questions at any step along the way, my contact information will be given out so that you feel free to ask me any question. There is no question that is silly, and there is no mistake I have not made. I will share with you that there have been times I have made a mistake. I have used my trusty seam ripper to tear the pieces apart and then have resewn them the same way I did the first time to make the mistake twice. So believe me, I will understand and probably be able to help you with any mistake. The design I chose for this table runner, having the rectangles offset, lets us focus on just making sure we can sew an accurate 1/4 inch. If we were to have done a pattern where these 4 corners had to meet, that would be a whole nother discussion of which way to move the seams and to butt them up to accurately get all these 4 corners to meet. That can wait for another day and another project. Right now, what we want to do is make sure, and right now I need to make sure to put things back the way they were. Okay, there we go. What we want to do is just really focus on that 1/4 inch. When you've laid out your design and you like how it looks, I can't stress this enough, take a picture of it with your camera on your phone or your iPad or any device. This will help as you go along, because I can't tell you how easy it is to accidentally switch something. Now you could say, well, I would know that's wrong right away, but believe me, if you have kind of a reference photo to look back at, it will make life easier. I even go one step farther, and I just take little pieces of scrap paper, and in the upper left-hand corner, I will, on the first piece, I will put this so that I know which row is which. I will tell you, in making a sample, several samples, I frequently I had not done this because I thought, I can keep 7 rows in order, but no, I did mess it up. So a little prevention by taking the picture and doing this will go a long way to making this a more enjoyable. Now, we're going to concentrate on rows 1 and 2. So let's just move this out of the way for right now. You will see this again. And even, let's just move so that we're just looking at row 1. Now, what we're going to do is and this is another area of debate, to pin or not to pin. I know plenty of people that would not pin this because what we're sewing right now is a very short section, but I would say to begin with, I would suggest pinning. And to be honest, if I were doing this in real life, I would still pin because accuracy is always going to be your friend. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold over rectangle 2 onto rectangle 1. And when you sew, you always want the right sides of fabric to face one another, okay? If by chance you were to do this, we would have to use the seam ripper, although it wouldn't be the worst thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over. We are going to get it so that it is just perfectly edge to edge. And then, let's see, I'm left-handed, so I would pin like this. But I know from watching plenty of people on TV, a right-handed person would be more likely to pin like this, okay? Or there is a third way that would, I guess, be ambidextrous. We could pin like this. Now, there. So then let's do this. We're going to do 4 onto 3. Again, we want it to match up because as accurate as we can be, the better our results will be. So I'll just revert to my left-handed ways. Okay. And I'm going to just watch. I'm going to put this on top of that. We're going to take 6 onto 5. And we're going to just leave little 7 here for a minute. Actually, we're probably going to take him over to the sewing machine. So now I'm going to show you a way, in that I told you quilting is not an inexpensive hobby, but one way to save money is to do what I'm going to do, which is called chain piecing. Now, remember we have our 3 and then we have piece number 7. We'll use him. So what you'll do is that we will move this under the presser foot, okay? We are going to keep this edge along our painter's tape. You will want to hold this tail. If you don't, life will go on, but there's a good chance that it'll get all kind of like for want of a better term, like a rat's nest underneath. So by holding that, we minimize that. And then I would caution you, we are not in a race. I would sew slower is better because you can then make sure that you're doing this. Now, as we get to this point, I would take the next piece, and again, just very slowly, because what we want to do is, the biggest thing is we want to be as accurate as possible. And yes, could I go much faster? I can, and I have, and then I find that I need to use the seam ripper more often. Now, if we were using the do you know what? I have now shown you something that is very, very bad. So please learn by my mistake. Let me repin this and show you the correct way to sew, not the incorrect way. Here is the correct way to sew. And as you come up to the pin, you take the pin out. I'm horrible about sewing over pins. And it is a very bad habit that if I'm teaching you, you should do better than I do. Sewing a pin, this is a nice old machine from the 70s, but sewing a pin can be very dangerous. If the needle were to hit the pin, it would break off. It has the potential to break off part of the needle, possibly throwing it back into your face. On newer machines, it also has the ability where it could jam the whole machine. So going forward, I will do better than I normally do and make sure that I remove my pins. You should remove your pins. As a new person, you should start out better. Now, what I have just done, there is a term for it, and it's called chain piecing. And by chain piecing, we have reduced the waste of our thread in between. It also has a benefit, and let me just move this here for a minute. We have the three pieces together. So because they're together, we know that this is 1 and 2, this is 3 and 4, this is 5 and 6, and this will be number 7. So I will now cut that, and we will put, we'll just cut that too. We will put number 3 onto number 2. We are going to pin, and this time I promise to do it correctly. Then we will take number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and put it on number 4. Okay. And we will pin this into place. Now, what you could do when you feel that you're ready, you could pin actually quite a few rows together. But I think as a beginner, it would be best just to do it, take it one at a time. So remember, we're going to put it under the presser foot, line it up with the painter's tape. At the beginning, we hold the tails of the threads. We are going to take a couple stitches. We are going to correctly pull out the pin as far as safety goes. Now, here's another thing. The safest way to stop the needle is to have the needle in the down position. This way, I can do pretty much anything with this and it will not move. Were the needle to be up, if I now wanted to move it for some reason, I could very well get it out of alignment. So let's just put that back down. So depending on the machine that you are sewing with, a lot of newer machines have it so that you can set it so anytime the machine stops, the needle is in the down position. But it's a good habit to learn to always have it in the down position. Okay? Now, if you want to become adventuresome, there is just enough space where then we can pull the next one, and we can take out that pin. Oh, sorry, bad habits. Be better than me. There we go. So now, and it's at this point where we have, we'll clip this one, we have sewn an entire row, and we'll now put on number 7. The nice thing about this fabric is that there is, while there is some direction to the pattern, for our purposes, it really does not matter. And so let's do this the last time. Hold on to the tails, get it next to the painter's tape, take a couple stitches, make sure the needle's down, pull out the pin, and then we can go on. Okay, so we have now sewn the first row together. If you had a rather ample workspace like this, and say you had row 2, you could then move to row 2 and sew it. For our purposes, before we go to the ironing board, I believe in doing something that is referred to as finger piecing. Now, finger piecing is nothing more than taking the fabric and pushing the seam to one side and you running your finger down. And by doing that and finger piecing it down, finger pressing, not piecing, finger pressing it down, it mimics what would happen if you were to get up and use an iron. And see, it lays perfectly straight and flat, and you could then go on and sew row 2. But if you prefer, you could also go and use an iron. I think what we should do now is move to the ironing board so I can show you there is a difference between ironing when quilting and ironing a garment. I have sewn row 2 together, and I know it's row 2 because it has a 2 here. And for this project, it really doesn't matter which direction we sew the seams. So I am going to show you how you would do it if you weren't to finger press and you were to come immediately over to your ironing board. Okay, so what I would do, this is what I would recommend. Before you do anything else, you would press it like this, and we're going to press each seam, and we're just going to hold it there for a minute. And what this does, and I think this concept is only several years old, is what we advise you to do this because it actually, the heat sets the thread deeper into the seam. And what we are now doing is called setting the seam. Some people believe in it. Some people do not. Do I see a hugely different effect? No, but it's certainly not going to hurt. Now, if I were to iron a shirt, I would sit and I would iron like this. There should never be any of this kind of motion when you are ironing in quilting. What we would do is we would place it there. Now, I move the fabric over, and let me orient myself for my lovely left-handedness, and I would go like this. The last thing you would want to do is just push it down like this. You have a very good chance of there becoming a pleat in the fabric. So what you would want to do is you would want to stretch it open and then just place it. Quilting, ironing and quilting is more of an up and down motion. There should not be a lot of movement, because the last thing we want to do is we do not want to distort the shape of the fabric. And given that this is fabric, it would be very easy to, by pushing too hard one way or the other way, distort what you've taken so long to sew accurately. So it's just like this and like this. You may see some people, when you watch them on TV, you will see them do something akin to this. In and of itself, that's fine. 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't have any problem. You certainly would have less problems with something like this that is rectangular in shape. I would hesitate never to do that with something that is more of a triangle or another shape, as it is quite easy to distort the shape of fabric. And again, as hard as we're working to get an accurate 1/4 inch, we now would not want to distort the fabric by pushing with an iron. Okay, so now we're going to go over to the table and I will show you how to attach row 1 to row 2. So now we have sewn rows 1 and 2. As you can see, because we've offset the rectangles, row 2 is longer than row 1. So to sew this so that everything lines up perfectly, or as perfect as things get in quilting, we are going to take row 1 and we are going to fold it in half to find the middle point. Now, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either fold it in half, the first and the last rectangles meeting in this corner, and then crease it here, or you could assume that these would be the same and you would just match up the seams right here, and if you do that, it should also be the same place. We have the true middle. we are going to take our finger and crease again. Now, I failed to show you before, in quilting, they have a notion or a device for all kinds of things. This one is to actually use to crease the seam or the middle. I honestly have to tell you I bought this and have never used it. It could be because I'm left-handed, but in the long run, you will never misplace your fingers. So just make a crease, and as we open it up, you can see, I hope you can see the crease that's right here, okay? So, let's see, hold on one second. I realized I made a mistake. So let's go and do this again, and I will correct myself. The crease actually in ours has to be down here. So let me extend the crease all the way through because I forgot that we are going to put row 1, we want it on top of row 2. So using this crease that's now running through the whole middle of the rectangle, the middle spot for row 2 is the intersection of rectangles 4 and 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we are going to take and we are going to put that crease, hopefully, let me see if we can show. That crease, I'll put a pin in it to make it more visible. We're going to take this crease, we're going to put a pin in it like that. We are going to then line that pin right in the middle of the seam between rectangles 4 and 5. We are going to hold it down with our finger as we pin on this side and as we pin on this side. Okay? You can remove that pin. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to take, and we don't want to push. There's nothing that has to meet anything, and in the end, no one is going to know if you're off, especially in this pattern. Now we want to make sure that we have the seam here, and we're going to put a pin through it so that we can flatten those as we sew. And what I did was I had you we were folding the seams to the right. In that way, as I will show you, when we put them through the sewing machine, the seam will go the way that we're traveling, and we won't be fighting it as it were if it were facing the other direction like a salmon. I'll show you better when we're sewing. So we're just going to line up the edges. Line up the edges, not pulling, just kind of patting it into place. And then we'll come back and we'll do this side. And in a you know, on a good day, everything's lining up. Your tops and bottoms, always, again, right sides together. And what I'm doing is I'm pinning on top of the seams here, just as a precaution, and on the seams that I can feel underneath, that are the seams of row 2. Okay. Now, we do want to take care to make sure that our number 1 is not in the way of where we will be sewing. And so now we have this pinned and we can take it to the sewing machine. So now we will sew row 1 onto row 2. And 1 second. One secret of mine is that I'm incapable of sewing with shoes on. So there we go. So I see here as I get it under my light that I could have done a better job. So I'm going to just fix that. Again, we're going to I'm going to start the sewing about 1/4 inch before the seam to make sure that by the time we get to the seam, we'll have a nice full stitch. Again, we're going to hold the tails of the thread. We don't want to make any messes behind. And then we are going to start and we're going to slowly sew. You might think, well, you know what? I could probably go a little faster, and you can, and in time you will. But I would say for right now, let's keep it a little slow. Now here's another spot where I could have done a little better job pinning. So I'll just fix that as we go. And let's see. Trying to remember to be good and take my pins out so that I teach you better than what I do in my own personal life. Okay. Let's see. We'll just do that. Again, feel free to reposition it as you go. You do not want to pull. Pulling can also distort. You just want to hold it loosely and let the machine do the work. I am not pushing. I am just letting the feed dogs of the machine do their job. Okay, let's do that. Let's get that a little better than I did it. And sometimes even if I had pinned these perfectly, things shift. This is fabric. There are times where I have had tried to match a point or something and have taken things apart several times, and that point will just not match, and then you just have to accept that that's the way the fabric is. And there are a few things in life that are perfect. And also, you have to keep a perspective. Right now, you're looking at something very close. And so if there's the slightest imperfection, it can become magnified in your brain. And you have to learn to just accept that sometimes done is better than perfect. Okay? Because believe me, no one will ever look as critically at your work as you will. Okay, so right here, we'll just shift him over a little, get him to be right there. And as I said, because we did because we folded or ironed the seams, they're going with us. They're not going against us, which makes life easier. Okay. And again, I would go past the seam. Okay. So now I will show you, we can do this. I'm going to show you how to finger press this open. Let's get rid of this. We don't need these extra threads. So what I would do is I would open it up. And again, we're trying not to We're trying not to distort. We're just running our finger this way. Let's see if I can do it so it's better. Just putting your finger down as if you were creasing a piece of paper. And we're not going traveling very far at a time. We're just going like this, a little at a time, little by little. And this will help you in some ways to have more accurate, but I will also show you. So we're finger pressing this down. Okay, so there we have it. Now we'll move over to the ironing board. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait, didn't you just tell us when you were ironing this open that there is some who believe that setting the seam sets it? Well, it's like whether you wash fabric or you don't wash fabric, whether you starch or not, there are two sides to most everything in quilting. Some people very much believe in the finger pressing and then coming with the iron and ironing it. They believe that by finger pressing, they have been able to feel that everything has been turned over, and they would argue that now they are setting the seam, okay? But, so this is how you would do it if you had finger pressed it and that. Now, if you said, well, let's see how we would do it the other way. This is row 1 to row 2. What you would do is you would, as we did it before, most of your ironing, almost all of your ironing in quilting should just be a lifting up and pressing down motion. And then I would caution you again, you will see people who would then go like this, and that has a real danger of distorting the fabric. What I would do is I would gently push it open, and then again, the most important thing is you don't want to have any kind of pleating, and you want it to be that the fabric is coming up evenly, so that when you look, if you were to look at it, you would not be able to pull it and there'd be anything in there. You want it to just be as if those two pieces were glued together, okay? Pleating is where by pushing it or such, or by going like this down, you might leave maybe a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch of fabric in there, which would then cause a divot to occur. So, actually, let's make sure we get this one down here. In the end, as with most things, you really cannot tell the difference whether you set the seam and then manipulated it open, or if you finger pressed it and then came and set the seam. We now have rows 1 and 2 together. Following the steps we've done to sew rows 1 and 2 and then 1 and 2 together, I have now sewn rows 3 and 4 together. So again, we will find in attaching row 2 to row 3, we will then find the middle spot of row 3. And again, it is just taking the rows, folding them in half. This time my crease on the top will work. We're just going to crease with our finger or our thumb. If you want, it doesn't hurt to put a pin in place. There are many different ways to accomplish things, and as you go along, you will find the way that works the best for you. And what we're going to do, well, let's see. Which would be the easiest way to show you? I think the easiest way to show you is that I will keep row 3 in place, and I will put another pin in the intersection of rectangles 4 and 5, just to know where we are. I will admit, you say, well, why wouldn't you know where you are? Well, I will admit that I have sewn rows together and been a rectangle off. And so just hopefully you'll learn from my mistakes. And so now we're going to just put the one pin over the other. We're going to put our finger down, whichever finger. If you're left-handed like me, you will like that. If you are right-handed, let's see if I can even do this right-handed. I am not one of those people that can sew or cut with a rotary cutter either way. Close enough, but I wouldn't want to do that full time. So before we move on, we see that our 2 pins are one on top of the other. We do not want to have them there, so we will carefully move those out. And we will continue like before. Just we're going to put a pin where we feel a seam underneath and put a pin where we see a seam on top, trying to make everything line up, top and bottom. I will say that the pattern for the what I call a trivet is very similar to this pattern, because again, I think it best that we get the quarter seam proficiency down pat. Life will be easier as you move forward in the quilting world. And let me show you that as I came here, I could feel that my little tag that I used for row 3 is here. I'm going to remove that. Even I think I will not mess up that that's row 3, but you know, on a certain day, who knows? And let's keep going, and let's pin it this way. Okay, so we're feeling a seam. So each rectangle should have a pin, and a pin. And for those who are in the camp of not pinning, this may seem a little excessive, but you know, to each his own. You may find after you do the first 2 rows that you don't feel a need to do it, and that's fine. This is your table runner, and you'll have to, everyone has their own way of finding the best way to accomplish tasks. Now we will go, and I will let you watch me sew one more time. Hopefully I will remember to remove the pins, like you should. Always remove the pins. Do as I say, don't do as I do. Okay, so now we're going to sew rows 1 and 2 to 3 and 4. I am going to put a pin just to let me know where that row starts so we can have a little beginning spot. Okay, so we're going to put this down. We'll remove that pin. Always hold on to our thread tails, and we will begin to sew. Okay. Again, you could go faster, but I think as your skills increase, your speed can increase, and sometimes it is the safer thing and the easier thing to go slow, because you will not have to rip out, and you'll have more of a consistent line of stitching. And I don't know if you've noticed that by having the painter's tape, whereas, one second, if we were just using this foot, we would only have about this much to get it into place. Whereas by using the painter's tape, we have several inches where we know we're lined up correctly. Although, if you choose to use the presser foot, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's go like that. To be honest, I've noticed that I have more of a tendency to use both fingers, but I'm trying to just use the one hand so that I don't obscure the filming. Okay, we are, I'd say, 2/3 of the way through. I am going to take this off and press it, and then we will sew rows 1, 2, 3, and 4 to rows 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so now we have sewn, or I have sewn all 7 rows together. At this point, I'm going to refer back to the starch or non-starch. About your iron, I have learned over the years, irons last longer if you do not use the water container. Eventually, no matter how good an iron you have, it will leak, it will spurt, it will leave you with a stain that you will curse its very existence. Instead, I would recommend going to do not buy one at a quilt shop. A quilt shop version of this will cost you twice as much money. Go to a beauty supply store. I'm not saying that you have to use starch. It was just water. And what this is, it's a mister that beauticians use. And you see, you just get a very fine mist. And so now that you're done, you might want to just lightly mist this and give it a final press so that as we move in our next installment to show how to quilt the quilt, we will have something that is very nice, very pressed, and just has a little more body to it as we move ahead. Let's just finish this up. I would caution, when you do the mister, stay out of this thing, because I usually end up choking myself, but that's just me. You're probably more coordinated. Okay, so now we will move over, and our last thing that we need to do is to square it up. Okay, so now we are just going to square it up. As I've said before, as careful as you may be, things may have shifted, they may have moved. This is fabric. This is, it is what it is. So what I would suggest is taking a line along this bottom edge, and let's line that up so that we have it going straight across. And it looks pretty darn close up here, but as we do this, we find that it's a little off this way. So let's just move it this way a little. No one's ever going to know if yours happens to be 1/8 of an inch smaller than your neighbor's. And then the safest way to cut with a rotary cutter is that you want at least 4 fingers here, and you want at least 1 finger off. Keep your blade closed when not using it. And I would also, on something, this isn't that long of a run, but maybe what we do is start here. We sew just a little bit. We move our hand up. We sew a little bit, cut a little bit more, and move our hand up. And there we go. Now, close that bad boy up. We'll do the same thing on this end. And like with any skill, the more you do something, the easier it will get. I would hope that this is not a project that would discourage you. And you can see here, we're quite a bit of difference off. I kind of think along the lines of the Amish. When an Amish person makes a quilt, they intentionally put an error into the quilt as their thought is that only God is perfect. I have never had to intentionally put a problem or an error into my quilts. There have always been plenty itself. Remember, having it done is better than not. This is where we're going to end today. We now have what is called a completed top for a table runner. The next time we meet, I will show you how you will take this, attach it to batting, some backing material. I will show you how to attach it either using straight pins or safety pins, and then I will show you some very rudimentary basic quilting, as quilting is not my strong suit. And then I will show you how to bind your project so it is completely finished. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you soon as we continue to finish our table runner.